In this collection of videos, we are going to be a little bit more precise about the exact strategy that we are coding, and we're going to start the process of coding that strategy in Excel. So if you'll remember, we are going through a process. Let's just identify specifically what we want to do. We want to begin by identifying cells that are in this sort of final state where a value of a cell could theoretically be forced, which means that as a cell, I have a collection of adjacent cells, and so I want to identify times where I have only one adjacent cell remaining to me that is not yet filled in. For this example right here, that would be all of the edge spaces except for the corners, because the corners do in fact have their only adjacent cells filled in. But every other cell around the boundary has a cell to its left or right or north or south that is filled in, and the only adjacent cell that is not filled in is in the next sort of layer on the inside of the puzzle. You should note that the checking process that we need to write might be different for corner cells, edge cells, and interior cells because of the number of adjacent cells that each type has. For example, corner cells only have 2 adjacent cells. These edge cells have 3 adjacent cells. They're all missing a cardinal direction, but interior cells will have 4 adjacent cells. And so we may have to break into cases as we progress through the puzzle. However, it is not just cells that have just this one interior spot left where they happen to be forced. For example, if I take a look at 66 over here, there's no action that forces the value of this cell right here because the cell 66 has a clear cell that leads into it and a clearly identified cell that leads out of it, because 2 of its adjacent cells that are filled have values 1 less and 1 greater than the value of this cell. So we'll have to add another layer of checking to the process that we're looking at, which is of these cells that have only 1 adjacent cell remaining, we want to only identify those that are missing what I've called either an in vertex or an out vertex, that are missing currently a way into the cell or a way out of the cell. So trying to focus not on cells like 66, but on cells like 7, where there's a way into the cell, but no current way out of the cell, because that's what's going to force the value of this final adjacent cell. And last but not least, just a small addition, we'll want to go back to the original puzzle once we've created a mechanism for identifying these cells, and we'll want to teach the Excel sheet how to highlight the cells that have this particular property. So let's get started in Excel. I've gone back now to identify this puzzle sheet, which is sheet 1, and as you can see, there's all sorts of other little sheets that are each keeping track of something for me. And where I want to begin is on this sheet called Write Cell Values. And the purpose of this sheet is to fill in the cells A1 through I9, which are the cells that correspond to filled in cells of the puzzle in my original sheet 1. And what I would like to place here in A1 is the value in the original puzzle of the cell B1. And what I'd like to place in B1 is the value in that original sheet that lies in cell C1. And I only want to do that if there is a value there. If there is no value there, then what I want to get placed inside of here is the number 0. And that 0 will serve as an indication to us if we're looking things up in this sheet of the Excel document that we don't have a value there yet, since 0 is not a valid option for our puzzle. Now, luckily for us, Excel is going to fill in a 0 here automatically. If we say, go to the puzzle and look up the value that's in this particular cell, and there isn't a value there, then Excel is going to automatically fill this in with a 0 for us, which is very much what we want. So what we're going to do here is simply tell Excel to go back to this other sheet and put in the value of a particular cell there. So inside of the cell A1, I want to use a formula to say go to the thing called sheet 1, and then an exclamation mark, and then I put the cell I want it to go to inside of that sheet. And inside of A1, what I want to put is the value to the right, which would be the cell B1. And that's what I want to go right here in A1. And now I can go back and check to make sure that it's done that correctly. Inside sheet 1, 34 is the value inside of B1. So let's return to this right cell sheet, click this cell, and we want to repeat that formula. We want Excel to guess at what we want all the way across that first row. Notice that it's done that. If we go back to sheet 1, the final value we see is 57 here. And then when it hits column I in the original sheet, so back here in right cells, notice that it put a 0 here because there was no numerical value entered in J1 of that sheet. And so Excel has defaulted to 0 here for us because there is no value there. Now if we highlight everything in this row and drag it down to row 9, it does everything it can for us. And you can again go back to sheet 1 and check to make sure that everything we want is in the right spots. That's all we're doing inside this tab called Right Cell Values. What your first assignment is going to be is to fill in the sheets left cell values, up cell values, and down cell values, which I think you can handle.